I've gotten a fair number of comments with people asking me about various steps in installing an extra hard drive into a computer. So I thought I'd make a video here about installing a 2.5-inch solid state hard drive as a second hard drive into a desktop computer. Let's talk about what you may need. If you have a newer computer case, you will probably have some mounting points with screws this far apart so you can get this hard drive mounted directly into this case and a 2.5-inch opening. If you have an older computer, it probably has multiple 3.5-inch openings, and the screw holes to mount those in are at a different distance apart than for a solid state or laptop hard drive, this 2.5-inch form factor. So you're going to need this adapter, and you're going to have to mount that hard drive onto it. And you can see the screws will come through from the bottom, and then it could slide along this point. So I want to put those screws in and mount it this way. Now, it may seem obvious to most people, but if you've never done it before, it's not obvious. So I want to talk about a couple of non-obvious things. I want to talk about screw pitches. So this screw right here has got a fine screw pitch, and if I try to screw it into the side of this hard drive here, it'll only go so far and it'll stick, because these holes, these screw holes are threaded for a fine pitch screw. So this is the wrong screw for this hard drive. So you got to make sure you have the right screws. Now, by the way, these screws are the perfect thread pitch for mounting this bracket into my computer case, as you'll see in a little bit. So I'm going to put these aside. Now, these screws right here are fine pitched, and these will screw into the side of this 2.5-inch hard drive just perfectly, or the bottom hole here. It'll thread in just perfectly. But the only other thing you may have to watch out for that may bite you is you may have a fine pitch screw, but it's too long. So if I try to use a screw of this length, that's as far as it goes in. It's not going to go down far enough to clamp it to this plate. So let me get this plate installed. The hard drive's going to go like this. It's going to be screwed in like this because I want my data connection and my power connection hanging out off the end as much as possible. So let me turn this over and get these screws started and get them good and snug so that this hard drive will not slide around on this mounting bracket. And I'll do a time lapse. Now I've got it all the way down to where I want it. Let me just snug up these screws really good because I don't want it sliding around anymore. Now we're ready to put this hard drive into a 3.5-inch bay of my desktop computer and get the power and the data hooked up. Here's my data cable, and the power, of course, comes right off the power supply. So this computer case only has one mounting point for a 2.5-inch hard drive. Here's my existing disk drive C hard drive, and you can see there are two screw holes here that are marked SSD. There's none of these others will line up properly, so that's why I have to use this adapter. All right, let me get the hard drive and the adapter inside the computer case. I'm going to sneak it down right in here, and once I get it in here, I'm going to move it back and forth until I can see the screw holes lining up on the 3.5-inch slot. Let me show you that. All right, so here's where the screw holes are going to line up, and now they're lined up. So now I just need to pop those two screws in there to hold it in place. All right, here's my coarse pitch screws. Let me get the first one started, and I like to get them started before I tighten any of them down. It's just easier that way. There we go. Now to hook up my data cable and my power cable. So here is my SATA power, and don't forget you have that L shape, and the L shape goes towards the middle of the hard drive. Don't plug it in backwards. The whole computer's trying to move on me here. Okay, I've got that seated, got those cables arranged decently, and we have the same issue with the SATA data cable. and it's got an L shape on it, and you've got a metal clip on the top that faces up. So don't get it in backwards because you can ruin the plastic on the hard drive, or if you're lucky, you just ruin the data cable. Okay, now that I got the data cable plugged in, the other end of it needs to be plugged into one of the SATAs on the motherboard, and these particular SATAs are sideways. Now I've got my power hooked up and my data hooked up. It's time to boot the computer and see if the BIOS of the motherboard detects the hard drive. Then I can go into Windows and format this hard drive for use. All right, I'm booting up this ASUS motherboard, and you press delete to get into the BIOS because I want to see if the BIOS is talking to the hard drive. Now, your BIOS may be different. It may be delete, it may be F2, it may be F10. Delete is most common, and you don't always have this easy mode. Sometimes it is a screen more like this, and you've got to hunt around to find it. But this ASUS BIOS is wonderful. And if I come over here, I can see I have a Crucial hard drive. That is my operating system hard drive. It happens to be 240 gigabytes and has the Windows Boot Manager on it for Windows 10. It lists the whole drive here again. And now I can see the Samsung hard drive, including down here, I can see my old school DVD drive. Now, I want to boot into Windows so I can use Windows Disk Management to format the hard drive and make it ready to hold data. All right, we got the hard drive hooked up. Now we need to format the hard drive and put a partition on it so it will hold data. So I'm just going to go to the Windows 10 search box here and say Disk Management. And as I start typing that in, I'm going to get the choice of create and format hard disk partitions. That's Disk Management. Once that pops up, I can see my two hard drives. I can see my operating system hard drive that has two hidden partitions. It has a 500 megabyte recovery partition, a 100 megabyte boot partition, and then the rest of it is disk drive C. And here is my new hard drive that says unallocated. Now, if you have a brand spanking new hard drive, when you go into disk management, it will ask you if you want to initialize this hard drive because it hasn't been initialized before, which means it's going to put a partition table on it, and you would want to put a GPT partition table on it. This hard drive already had a partition table, it just has no partitions on it. So I'm going to right click on the unallocated area of the hard drive and say New Simple Volume, and I'm going to go through the wizard. Next, I want to use the entire hard drive, all the space on it. I'm going to hit Next. I can pick the disk drive letter I want to assign to this hard drive. Disk drive D is good. I want the hard drive to be NTFS file system. That is the most efficient file system for Windows. I don't want exFAT. I want NTFS. And then I can give my hard drive a volume label. How about Bubba? Okay, maybe not. Maybe I should just call it Data Drive. Then I'll hit Next and say Finish. Now it's going to create the partition and format it, and it's already done. There is my disk drive D called Data Drive, and if I go to this PC, now we can see my existing disk drive C and my new disk drive D, and then my DVD drive, hey, I'm old school, is disk drive E. But that's what it takes to add a new hard drive to an existing Windows. You've got to cable it up, data and power, make sure you see it in the BIOS, and then you have to partition and format it, and that's a matter of right-clicking on the new drive and creating a new simple volume. That's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, and I thank you. Take care.